Good evening, all. My name is Talha Köse. I'm the coordinator of SETA Brussels office. This evening, it is our first day of the lockdown in the second cycle of the coronavirus. So, unfortunately, some restrictions come to our lives, but the politics, the security situation in and around our region has not stopped yet. So we have lots of issues we're going to discuss. So this evening, we're going to talk about the implications and possible ramifications of the ceasefire in the Nagorno Karabakh issue. As you know, the 44 days war between Azerbaijan and Armenia on the Karabakh changed the status quo, which was maintained for 27 years. So it's an important turning point, not only for Azerbaijan and Armenia, but the entire region. So it will have a long-lasting effects for the region. Of course, Armenia lost some of the territories it was controlling illegally, and for Azerbaijan, it was regaining of their own territories. However, Turkey and Russia were also involved actively in this confrontation and in the conflict as an whole. So both countries played significant roles. And what's happening in this ceasefire is important because the previous one couldn't bring lasting peace to the region. So this one seems to be a little bit more promising. However, there are certain questions in our minds. So today, we're going to discuss what will be the ramifications, consequences of this war and ceasefire for Azerbaijan, Armenia in the entire South Caucasus region, with Turkish-Russian relations and also, energy and geopolitical conditions in the region. So we have two distinguished guests this evening. So Nurşin Ateşoğlu, Güney. She's a professor of political science and international relations at Nişantaşı University. And our second speaker is Professor Pritchin. He has been a research fellow at Institute of World Economy and Russian Academy of Sciences. Both have impressive academic and policy relevant experiences. So we will start with 10 minutes introductory talks from both our speakers. We will start with Professor Nurşin Güney. And after the initial talks, we're going to have turn off some questions. We are also open to some questions from our followers. Okay, Nurşin Hocam, the floor is yours, please.
Okay, thank you so much for introductory remarks you made. As far as I've seen the title of the web panel, it's called Ceasefire Karabakh and What's Next. And this title seems to me a very promising one when it's about timing, especially when we compare the situation in 30 years back from now. I mean, the ceasefire that was first signed in 1994, the broken ceasefire was again made via Russia itself. One deep note should be put here that all the ceasefires has made, mostly the ones that we have seen, made via Russia itself. This was, of course, because of the neglect of the West as well. I'm putting the blame on them purposefully because I know and I've studied the experience of EU, especially in conflict resolution-wise, as well as the US neglect. There was a brief moment in the 90s, 1992 onwards, when these three South Caucasus countries became independent. And once the passage of energy pipelines were assured, then we have witnessed that, especially in regard to this conflict that was frozen, which is set frozen. I will come to that point very soon. We have seen a neglect and passive attitude towards it. There was the Minsk process, but again, the Minsk process was not promising either. It was not a remedy for bringing this conflict to a political solution. And so regarding with the 90s, for about 10 years, we have seen a settlement. And in our studies, we have seen that this conflict, Nagorno Karabakh, was described as a frozen conflict. But what was frozen was not the conflict itself. It was quite alive and it was dynamic. We were seeing that along the line of contact, there were several skirmishes, and we have witnessed so far two big wars that has been waged. One of them, as Talha Hocam has said, it lasted for about 44 days, and the one in April 2016 lasted for about 4 days. So starting with 20 on, there were clear signs that, the escalation was coming. And so even though as far as I know and read the speeches of President Aliyev, we have seen ignorance from the Western part of the world. Anyway, so what would I say is that the conflict has continued either through the skirmishes that we have witnessed, not just through these two wars, but along the contact line. People have lost their lives, and this is a dynamic conflict. But as I said, what is frozen was the political solution. And it's very interesting and there was the lack of peacekeeping force between the two sides. That's also a weird thing that I have noticed. When you compare the other unresolved conflicts, there's always in between, there is some kind of a peacekeeping force that is being located. Now, with this new deal that has been inked, there's going to be the Russian peacekeepers that they are still there. And also, again, as I said, despite to the situation when we compared 90s and now, things have radically changed. Not only the position of two states, namely Azerbaijan and Armenia, and the regional context and even beyond, things have in 30 years totally changed. And also the geopolitical and geoeconomic rivalry sometimes is overt, sometimes is covert, is still continuing. And here at this point, with this newly inked peace deal, I am very much optimistic, despite to some questions like what would be the status of, Karabakh, for instance, or, whether this joint observe center that is being, going to be constructed between Russia and Turkey in Azerbaijan, whether it's going to work efficiently or not. There are several questions ahead of us. And one of them is very important that comes into my mind. That is also the situation in Yerevan, for instance. We have all watched the news that people were very upset and they were not accepting the newly inked this deal, peace deal among Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Russia. And people are so upset about it, and so they have just flocked into the streets and protesting the Prime Minister of Pashinyan, and they even requested the resignation of him. So as far as I see, as among the three states, Yerevan seems to be the weak circle. So we need to be careful about what might be happen in the future if we want to, maintain this peace deal in contact, and we could go in future to a political solution, of course, under the conditions of international law and with diplomatic negotiations. So this should be important to be kept in mind. And also, very briefly, there is a radical change, as I said, when you look at the situation in the 90s and now, and that is the Turkey's position. I mean, Turkey, from the very beginning of inception of this 44 days war, has given its all support to Azerbaijan so that, Azerbaijan could regain its already invaded territory. As you know, Karabakh, according to UN, was part of the Azerbaijan's territory. So apart from this, still during the peace negotiations, Turkey has stand next to the Azerbaijan government. So what comes into my mind, I guess, there should be lessons learned. You know, what has happened in 30 years, why international community plus the institutions, I'm referring to OSCE, which was, you know, tasked and the mission of conflict resolution and mission of bringing up peace to this region was given to it. So we need to also consider what has lagging on the side of these co-chairs, and especially whether the France neutrality still remains or not is another question that comes into my mind. And I guess I have for a few more minutes to go. Maybe I should also talk about here at this point about the future. As I said, since Azerbaijan is now very much happy because they have regained most of their invaded territory, and they have already declared that they are ready for some kind of a mechanism that will bring a regional cooperation and is looking at both Russia and Turkey. So I will stop here because I'm thinking that this newly inked peace deal, broken by Russia itself, I'm so sure will bring, benefits to all three countries, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Armenia. And this would, if these three countries, and as well as the others, namely the Westerners, will not make the same mistakes, and they will try to bring up the lessons learned, the failures that they have made in the past in this process. Perhaps we might have a regional stability in the coming days, if not in the years. Thank you so much.
So our second speaker is Professor Stanislav Pritchin. So Professor Pritchin is expert on Caspian and Russian policies in the region. So Professor Pritchin, I mean, Russia played an important role in this ceasefire. So especially in reaching the ceasefire, Russian involvement, and in the aftermath of the involvement, Russian peacekeeping was crucial. So this definitely disappointed, especially the 44 days Armenian side. Yet the Azerbaijan was quite happy that Russia stayed neutral, and Turkey coordinated its efforts with Russia. So what is the Russia's grand vision in the region, expectations, and how do you see the possibilities of the sustainable ceasefire and stability?
First of all, thank you very much for invitation and this opportunity to discuss very important for Turkey both and Russia issue. Of course, for Russia, Nagorno Karabakh conflict, this is a quite problematic issue. I explain why. First of all, both of these countries, participants of this conflict long-term, are both very important Russian partners in the region. On the one hand, Armenia is the member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, is a part of the Eurasian Economic Union. Russia has a military base in Armenia, so there are plenty of bilateral agreements between Armenia and Russia. So this is an official Russian ally. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan is quite important Russian economic partner. Also, this is a very important Russian ally within the Caspian dialogue about the status of the Caspian Sea in the area of question of implementation of the north-south transport corridor from Iran through Azerbaijan to Russia. So, and a lot of economic projects. And so in such circumstances, of course, for Russia, conflict between two Russian allies, it's quite challenging because on the one hand, Russia has some obligations in relations with Armenia. Russia has to protect in case of real risks for independence on borders of Armenia. But at the same time, Russia also has very good relations with Azerbaijan. Russia, alongside with Turkey, is one of the most important partner in military sphere, with Azerbaijan as a seller of military equipment. So it's quite problematic issue when two of your allies are in conflict, and each of them expect that you should support them, especially Armenia. And previously it was like this. Armenia each time tried to play and try to engage Russia as the external player on the side of Armenia to stop all of Azerbaijani attempts to return its territory. But not this time. And the factor of Pashinyan is quite important, because previous leaders of Armenia, Serge Sargsyan, Robert Kachiryan, Lemon Ter-Petrosyan, all of them had very good personal relations with Russian leaders, with Boris Yeltsin and then with Vladimir Putin. And both this psychological level of good relations with Russian leader, with obligations within the Collective Security Treaty Organization, made Russia more pro-Armenian rather than pro-Azerbaijanian. But not this time. As you know, the Velvet Revolution happened in April 2018. Nikol Pashinyan came to power with his new vision of foreign policy strategy of Armenia, and it looked like Armenians tried to slightly be much more far from Russia and Russian vision of regional security and cooperation with Russia, and this played very bad role for Pashinyan. And but generally, we could see now that Russia, from the beginning of this conflict, the Second Karabakh War, tried to stop it, tried to put sides at the table to start discuss. So in the beginning of October, for example, Russia organized the trilateral meeting on the level of Minister of Foreign Affairs. Unfortunately, negotiations took more time than ceasefire was broken finally. But now it looked like situation is much more stable. And I would agree with previous speaker that now we have a real chance to shift the South Caucasus region from the frozen conflict to the full-fledged peace in the region. Because on the one hand, now we don't have this unbalanced situation with, for example, Azeri regions around Nagorno Karabakh. They are on the control of Azerbaijan. Then there is Russian peacekeepers as a guarantor of ceasefire. There is an agreement with obligations of all sides, and this agreement is very important because comprehensive with a lot of aspects which are more important for the peace and the future of the region. And the final, we have now the full victory of Azerbaijan. Armenia, during long period of time, used its privilege to be on the top of the mountain, through controlling Nagorno Karabakh. Now, Armenia lost this advantage, and Azerbaijan is much more power and has much more power to beat Armenia in case of returning to the conflict. So speaking about future, I would highlight three possible scenarios for Nagorno-Karabakh future. One of them, this is pessimistic. For example, the reason of this pessimistic scenario might be a withdrawal one of two sides from this agreement. In this case, the returning to the conflict and the confrontation format of relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan might happen. Of course, this is the worst case scenario for all countries, but it I don't think this scenario would be very long from the point of view of real confrontation, hot confrontation, because Azerbaijan is much more power, as I mentioned. The second scenario is neutral, when all 10 aspects of this agreement would be implemented, and partly or not all of them, but countries, Armenia and Azerbaijan, wouldn't return to the peaceful rhetoric and peaceful cooperation, constructive cooperation. Unfortunately, this is the most realistic scenario from my perspective, because it's very difficult to imagine that countries which had been living in the stage of the conflict during 300 years, 3 decades, can one day turn off the rhetoric of aggression and hatred to each other and start to speak to each other, to discuss with each other, to cooperate with each other. And this is, from my perspective, one of the most important obstacles for future reconciliation of Nagorno Karabakh as the peaceful area and the surrounding territory. And the third scenario, optimistic scenario, this is an implementation of all elements of Nagorno-Karabakh ceasefire agreement from 9-10 November. This is the start of reblocking economic cooperation, opening borders, including Armenian Turkish border. This is the repairing connection between Nakhchivan Autonomous Republics and Azerbaijan, and working and construction of new roads bypassing Shusha from Armenia to Nagorno-Karabakh, returning all refugees, including Azeri refugees who lived till the conflict, the first Karabakh conflict, to Nagorno-Karabakh, and to start cooperation without thinking and speaking about the future status of Nagorno-Karabakh, to postpone this issue for the midterm, long-term period of time, to make this question is much more essential, I would say, natural in resolving, when people, for example, Armenian people of Nagorno-Karabakh will see how their life could change positively in case of repairing cooperation with Azeri governments, with Azeri economy, with support of Baku, as we could see now, repairing roads, infrastructure all around Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Probably I would stop here. Thank you so much for your attention. I will be happy to answer a question to continue our discussion.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, we will take some questions, but before returning to Professor Nurşin Güney, I'm going to ask you a question, especially this is widely discussed. So some analysts argue that Russia is one of the winners in this war in terms of Russian interest. I mean, kept West outside of the equation and maintained some balance, and also had long-term standing in the region. So what do you think is the best scenario for Russian side, for Russian interests, and what may be some potential risks for Russia?
Maybe I would try to answer if we have some technical problems. Of course, for Russia, this is, first of all, the question of responsibility, because now Russian peacekeepers are responsible for ceasefire and for peaceful living Azeri and Armenian people all together. Of course, some of the countries, for example, France, we saw this attempt to destabilize situation through recognition of independence of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. So, of course, it was a real provocation to try to discord this agreement, this is external risks. Of course, internal risk, this is the problem of reconciliation, because, of course, we have now 5 years of this credential for Russian peacekeeper, but there is no any possible guarantee that by the end of this period of time, situation would be stable for leaving Russian peacekeepers from the region. And of course, there is a possibility for some provocation on the ground. For example, some of radical groups of Armenian people will try to provoke some conflict with other military, try to engage Russian peacekeepers. Of course, this is the risk. And in such circumstances, of course, this is the risk for all sides. And risk, of course, political turmoil in Armenia. Because now Nikol Pashinyan, he is the keeper of this signature, I would say. He is responsible for this agreement. And this turmoil and unstable situation in policy and attempt to keep him off from the office might be quite dangerous, because some radical power can come to power in Armenia and try to revenge on the battlefield. So this is also a risk.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So another question to Professor Nurşin Güney. So Professor Güney, as we know that this is a complete change of the geopolitical structure in the entire region. So are there any risks for Turkey, Azerbaijan, and are there any potential tensions which may broaden the situation? Because we know that despite all these expectations of neutrality, some of the European actors commented on the situation. So are there any risks for Turkey and Azerbaijan to keep this the ceasefire situation and the new geopolitical configuration?
Thank you. As our previous participants have said so, first of all, the situation is clear enough. Russia is playing a balancer role between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That's one thing. And they have a defense agreement with Armenia, and we know the all military details and so on. And on the case of Azerbaijan, it is not the Azerbaijan that we used to know in the 90s. It's much more powerful in economic-wise as well as military-wise. So that's also one thing to remember. And also, again, Azerbaijani people and as well as the administration is very happy about the result that what they have at this moment. So they would be pushing for this peace deal to be continued. Maybe again with the Turkish case, Turkey seems to be an actor in South Caucasus. We are standing with again Azerbaijan, as well as with being some kind of a not facilitator, but being present at least with this agreement during the peace agreement while it was coming into force. There is one problematic issue stands there, and that is the Minsk process. I mean, among the three, yes, as our previous speaker has said so, as I also mentioned it, the weakest circle stands to be the Armenians, because of there might be a political turmoil due to the people who demand resignation of Pashinyan in the country, and also there might be provocations coming from radicals in Armenia. But apart from that, as far as I see, I mean, on the this tripartite deal between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia, I would say they seem to be the two sides, at least Azerbaijan and Russia, seems to be receptive of this agreement. So Turkey is also, has engaged with Russia how they could, develop more cooperation to bring this peace deal to a longer time, to a solution. But on the side of Westerners and misprocess, especially the co-chair of French seems to be problematic. Despite all these UN decisions, resolutions, France seems, according to my viewpoint, France has already lost its neutral position. So maybe somehow, some kind of a solution should be found, and maybe rather than France, there should be a neutral, at least a EU representative would be being as one of the co-chairs. But as I said, of course, there are always risks, but now that after 30 years, as I said, due to the already mentioned changes that I have mentioned on the side of Azerbaijan, I guess she is there and more powerful to somehow affect in the coming days about protecting this peace deal. I hope the Westerners, they didn't do anything up till now. We have seen how, for instance, U.S. has disengaged from South Caucasus. And also we have seen incoherence among the European Union countries. And even when you look at the readings of EU papers written by IR scholars, you have seen that they have also neglected, the EU's conflict resolution mechanisms in regard to this Karabakh conflict. So let's hope that, the worst case scenarios will not come into force. And Turkey is there, and she's quite active, and she's going to give her support to this peace deal as well as Azerbaijan. And the cooperation with Russia is very important and precious. I hope, in this case, these three countries, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Russia, and including Armenia, to make Armenian people to have a hope in this peace deal, you need to bring up some functional issue cooperations in economic wise, for instance. So I hope, like the case in Yugoslavian conflict, for instance, after NATO intervention, we have seen EU went in, and that is how the rebuilding and reconstruction of economies has been worked on it. And here in this case, I guess we need to find win-win case for bringing up hope on the side of losers as well.
I would like to ask another question. As we know that in 1990s, EU played, and together with the US, played a significant role in the surrounding regions. But in this case, with the exception of few diplomatic comments, they really did not get involved in this situation. Why this is the situation, and do you think they will keep their distant position in this conflict?
I was writing a paper back in 2006, and that was when BTC was signed. So since then, I have even written in my paper that, West has lost its interest, especially USA, to this region, namely these three frozen conflicts in South Caucasus, not only Karabakh conflict. So, and also with the Trump administration, we know the situation. They were not much involved in this issue. And before that, with Obama, again, starting with 2008, there was the Russia first policy. Then they have shifted to another thing. Then there is the pivot to Asia. And so this is the neglected years that follow one another. And here with the Biden administration, I don't see them focusing much on this region or in general to this region, but in particular to Karabakh issue, other than rhetoric statements like, peace and stability should, last in this region, blah, blah, blah. And with the case of EU, it seems to be a lot more confused among various competing states, like France versus, for instance, Germany in terms of leadership. And again, among the 28 countries, we see incoherence in bringing up, European defense and common foreign policy. And so I'm not hopeful that they will do something positive. I wish they could at least, prevent France acting not this way. If it's going to be a co-chair of this Minsk process, it has to be neutral.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask another question to Professor Pritchin. Professor Pritchin, as we know, the West is outside of this equation, and definitely there are some risks involved, but there are some other issues in the region as well. We know the Georgian situation, Armenia, Azerbaijan, also the relations between Turkey and Russia. Do you think if the ceasefire is maintained, can there be another, political and economic zone that can function in the long term for stability and co-prosperity? I mean, is it possible? Because we know that it was, Russia tried to expand this Eurasian Economic Union and tried to bring together some of the countries. So far, there were some obstacles. So do you think, together with Turkey and Russia, can there be another, structure that may provide economic and political stability to entire region?
Thank you very much for this very, very important question. Of course, Russia would like to have Azerbaijan within the Eurasian Economic Union, and for the long period of time, this frozen conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan was a real political obstacle for joining Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan couldn't imagine itself with Armenia in one union with its enemy. But at the same time, we could see that bilateral relations, economic relations, cooperation between Azerbaijan and Russia, they are really quite effective and quite dynamic without even being in one union. Of course, for Azerbaijan, it might be quite a challenging question, because Azeri government during all its time of independence tried to be balanced and equal distant from different center of power in the world. Of course, Azerbaijan with Georgia and Turkey implemented this significant geopolitical project BTC, but at the same time, Azerbaijan was a partner of Russia within the Caspian status negotiations. And so in all, the same with relations with the United States and Iran. Iran, an important partner and neighbor of Azerbaijan, but United States and the leading power. In this case, of course, Azerbaijan is trying to provide quite balanced foreign policy with pragmatic relations with all center of power. In such circumstances, I wouldn't say that joining of the Eurasian Economic Union is quite has quite high possibility. More probably, Azerbaijan will try to continue develop good relations both with Turkey, with Russia, with different centers without joining this organization. And this balanced foreign policy of Azerbaijan, on the one hand, brings some opportunities for regional cooperation. For example, in 2008, as you remember, it was an idea of Caucasian platform, this 60 sites platform of cooperation, Iran, Turkey, Russia, as external players, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan as regional power. So this configuration, from my perspective, might be quite interesting, especially today when the main obstacle for regional cooperation, Armenian and Azerbaijan conflict, almost resolved. There is the case for full-fledged confrontation between two key regional players. In such circumstances, I especially taking into account close relations between Turkey and Azerbaijan, I think it might be quite compromising decision. It will bring, for example, opportunities for development transit through Armenia through developing transport corridors between Azerbaijan and Turkey, between Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan, it will bring some money profit for Armenia in the future. And it will be a region from the point of view of investment climates, investment potential.
Mm-hmm. One of our followers asked this question. So it is possible that the nationalistic rhetoric will increase in Yerevan, in Armenia, and this will probably be supported also by diaspora as well. So, I mean, what may be the consequence of this, and how do you think, incentives can be provided to Yerevan to play more constructively? We know that the opening of the border between Turkey and Armenia was an issue. So still the potential for cooperation. But what other incentives can be provided with Yerevan, and how this rising nationalistic rhetoric can be constrained?
Very important question, because on the one hand, during centuries, national rhetoric and national ideology was the key and strategic for Armenian independency, and this is the myth of the victory and the self-confidence about the position in Nagorno Karabakh made Armenian is very traumatic loser today. It's very difficult for Armenian people, for Armenian political establishment to live with this new reality. And in such circumstances, unfortunately, national rhetoric and returning to this ideology, nationalistic, is one of the way to canalization of this trauma. But at the same time, I hope, of course, it will take time to return to reality, to start to access to this new environment when you cannot do anything with this. But at the same time, you have to develop your country. We have to use this new opportunity. And new opportunity, this is opening borders. This is turn off your rhetoric and try to start to look at your neighbors as your potential partners, not your enemy. It's not easy, but I hope it might happen one day.
Mm-hmm. Another question is, again, to you, before I return to Professor Güney. So we know that there's a presidential change in Washington. So we know that the new president will be more interested, Joe Biden will be more interested to deal with Russia. So do you think America may be more involved in the Caucasus region in the coming period? Are there any risks involved if they get more focused to this region? So what is the general sentiment in Moscow about that?
There is no positive expectations for any changes in Washington, to be perfectly honest, because this is unfortunately a very bad dynamic when one administration after another, relations with Russia, without independence, without taking into account Republican this administration or Democratic, our relations on the very, very bad trajectory to the hell, unfortunately. And in such circumstances, there is no any positive expectation that new administration could bring some new positive agenda. And in such circumstances, of course, Russia is not expected any positive engagement of United States in the Caucasus. And I fully agree with the professor that the interest of the United States to the Caspian region, to the South Caucasus, is far from the peak which we saw, for example, in the 90s when the new oil agreement was signed between Azerbaijan, when the construction of Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan was gone. So, and today, of course, the Caspian Sea in the South Caucasus is not the very strategic priority for the United States. Confrontation with China, Middle East, Israel, but not South Caucasus. Of course, we couldn't accept the possibility of returning the United States to a more proactive policy in the region as the leading power in the world. But of course, United States doesn't have such full-fledged instruments which could help, for example, to be at the same level as Russia and Turkey, for example, today in the region. And in such circumstances, I wouldn't expect change of strategy and diplomacy of the United States as the important factor which can drastically change reality and environment in the region around Nagorno Karabakh.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, Professor Güney, as we know that you are also expert in energy politics, and for Azerbaijan, it's a very key area. So my first question is, how is this new situation affect Azerbaijan's energy diplomacy and strategy? And secondly, how is this in general affect Azerbaijan's political and geopolitical orientation? So is it going to change a lot, or I mean, do you expect the medium and long-term consequences of this, new situation?
As our previous speaker has said, so I'm so sure Azerbaijan will continue to conduct its, balanced foreign policy. So this is what she used to do up till now. But now, I mean, if this peace deal will continue, if we may see, kind of a stability, at least like pockets of stability in the coming days, months, or years, then it would be much easier for Azerbaijan to, enjoy the benefits of energy sources that she has. But again, what would I say? Nothing much changed in the energy field. I mean, it used to be, for instance, if we take, for instance, TANAP project, again, this was a competitive project for once Russia's project for South Stream. And now things have changed. There is the Turkish Stream. And so what Azerbaijan in previous years has done with TANAP and for its extension, when it chose a TAP project, it balanced the Russian concerns. So probably in energy field too, again, especially if there would be incoming projects in the future, it will try to again abide with its balanced foreign policy. And but the situation would be much more convenient because there is the boost of being the victor over this war. So there is the self-confidence, as well as economic-wise, they feel much better. They would be much more relieved to engage with different countries to cooperate in the region and even beyond. I mean, this, as it has been said, we know that, for instance, in economic-wise and in arms sales and everything, they are engaged with Russia as well as with other countries, including some European countries as well, Turkey also, Israel also. So things would be much more easier, I would say, for Azerbaijan. But in case of, again, conducting this balanced foreign policy, they have given signals previously that, they don't want to become a part of Europe or European membership. They don't want it. So this gives them freedom. And also they have become in 2011 part of non-alignment movement. So all these signs shows us that in the future, again, it will continue to have good relations with Turkey, Russia, and things will be continue in this way. But the relations with Turkey, where we have come this moment is quite precious, and it's more strengthened. This is the main difference.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask another question to you, because in the international media, the Turkey's position has been discussed a lot, especially with regard to Turkey's defense sector, defense technology, and cooperation with Azerbaijan has been highlighted. So what is the possible consequence of this development for Turkey's overall geopolitical positions, and how do you think this will have long-term consequences for Turkey?
I mean, Turkey has made a leap forward in its defense and military sector. I mean, this is clear enough. A transformation in its military field has been made, and we have seen positive consequences of this, especially with the imposing its new security paradigm. And we have seen that in for military power projection in Syria, for instance, we have seen how things have changed when you compare Turkey's position with the 90s. She was successful there. And also she has attained almost blue water capacity. And even during the pandemic time, we have seen that, Turkey was able to send some of its navy to the coast of Libya. And she has able to maintain it there. I'm not mentioning about the drones that she has made with its own national means. So in other capacities, she's also developing it. In the Navy, we have made a lot of improvements. And again, this sector, Turkey has made, again, a successful improvement. And of course, she would be followed in the military field, and again she's open to export its capabilities who are willing and to buy it, and in this case she's cooperating with Azerbaijan, and so I'm so sure this will continue more in a strengthened way, which is natural, because we are witnessing that in the last 2 decades or so, the transformation of Turkey's military and defense industry has been very successful. And of course, this has made Turkey to, in case of crisis, to adopt some kind of flexibility, which is called strategic autonomy. And this is how she is practicing and retaliating the crisis around herself beyond its border. This is very important. She didn't have this capacity in the 1990s, but both in onshore and offshore, she has a lot of capacity to, operate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I'm going to ask my last question to Stanislav. So we know that in Moscow there are, huge, Azerbaijani and Azeri and Armenian diaspora, and they play a significant role in the business sector, in many sectors. So, and usually the Russian authorities and business sector has quite constructive relations with both. So how is this new situation affect, how is it expected to affect their position, their investment and long-term position within Russian Federation? What do you think about this?
Thank you very much for your question. Yeah, basically both diasporas are quite pragmatic. During the last several years, we haven't seen any clashes between businesses, between ordinary people of Armenia and Azerbaijan, because they are both part of Russian society. Of course, after clashes in July, after clashes between people, Armenian and Azeri people in Europe, in the United States, some such attempts happened in Russian capital as well. But Russian government immediately had important conversation with leaders of diasporas with very strict order not to allow to use Russian territory for such conflicts, because it's extremely important for Russian government to keep peace between 88 nationalities which are living in Russia. So, and after that, no one any clashes. Just after the victory of Azerbaijan, some activities with Turkish and Azeri flags all around St. Petersburg and Moscow on the cars with boom boom, and so it was quite significant, but it was peaceful without any clashes with Armenian people. This is I hope it will bring, Russian government try to use diasporas for reconciliation, but unfortunately this hatred and this aggression behavior and uncompromised positions of both sides made this attempt quite ineffective, unfortunately. I see that situation will be even better than it was previously. Of course, we couldn't expect that Armenian Azeri diaspora will start together, set up some startups or do some business together, but I hope without conflicts.
So I would like to thank all of you. It was a very important topic. I think we will continue to discuss this because I think it will have a long-term consequences for the entire region. So some people consider this situation as a competition between Turkey and Russia, and some others also mentioned this is a potential for cooperation. So I think, but what we know is that the region, entire region, the Caucasus and the surrounding region needs some stability and prosperity. And the new reality is that West is out, and it is responsibility of the actors, Russia, Turkey, and also including the Iran, to bring long-lasting stability to this region. So, of course, European dynamic would contribute positively if they also want to contribute. But I think we have to adapt to this new reality, and possibly both Azerbaijan side and Armenian side will try to adapt to new situation. So I'm hoping that this will bring long-term lasting peace and prosperity to the region. So we will continue to discuss, but for tonight's discussion, inshallah. So we always talk about risk, but I think there are also some opportunities lying in this new situation. So I would like to thank you for your contributions, for your comments, and we are hoping to host you again, inshallah, for discussing the peace side and prosperity side of this story. So I would also like to thank to our followers. So I know that this is the first night of the curfew. So hoping, health to both people in the region, Turkey, Russia. So I hope we can overcome this pandemic and cooperate in that field as well. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.